Our theme for today is covenant, and especially the meaning of covenant as articulated in the Old Testament, or also known as the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, there are several ways to approach the Hebrew Scriptures themselves, considering it's a vast array of writings across many centuries by a countless number of writers, with a countless number of differing perspectives and worldviews. It's only logical to look for some kind of consistency within the chaos. And that consistency is covenant. Now, humanity's covenant with God has developed across time, and it's grown because humanity's changed across time and grown. So that covenant continues to develop with us. But what I'm saying for all of this is that covenant is the thing that ties all of this together. Maybe think of it this way. The world is made up of multiple layers of interdependent relationships, right? People, plants and animals, the planet itself. But for those relationships to thrive and to flourish, it only makes sense that everyone and everything lives in right relationship. So how do we do that? Covenant. The essence, the core of covenant, is living in right relationship with God and one another. Now, the text from the book of Genesis that we're about to hear, in this reading, we see God's covenant with humanity in its infancy. But in the second text, the one from the prophet Jeremiah, we see this covenant begin to mature. So bearing that in mind, and as we hear these two texts, I invite you to listen for a change in how we're called to live into God's covenant. Here now today's readings from the Hebrew Scriptures.
The first reading is Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Abram's family moves to Canaan. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Those who curse you, I will curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you." And the second reading is Jeremiah 31, verses 31 to 33. The new covenant. "The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and Judah. It won't be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. They broke that covenant with me, even though I was their husband, declares the Lord. No, this is a covenant that I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my instructions within them and engrave them upon their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people." This ends the reading.
When I was in seminary, I had a wonderful professor named Dr. Elizabeth Platt. She taught Old Testament and Hebrew, and now in order to fully paint a picture for you of my Old Testament and Hebrew language classes experience, I have to describe Dr. Platt. She was a tiny woman, about yay tall, probably about her mid-70s at the time. And as you might imagine, the depths and the theological detail in a seminary class could become, well, kind of dry. Ask me sometime about studying Philippians in Greek. Dust. Anyway, back to Dr. Platt. Her classes were anything but dry. And here's a couple of examples. In our Hebrew class, we learned the alphabet by watching a Barney video. Do y'all know who Barney is? Okay. The children's purple dinosaur? So you have to picture the scene. Here's a group of very, upright. Well, most of them except me were pretty upright and serious, we'll say, group of graduate students aspiring to become pastors and theologians and professors, all singing the Hebrew alphabet to a purple dinosaur. Let that soak in for a moment. But the best example I can give you, and the one that takes us back around to covenant, is something called suzerainty treaty theology. And it was the core of Dr. Platt's understanding of the Hebrew Scriptures. As a matter of fact, in the very first class, out of nowhere, this tiny 70-something woman jumped up on the table, waving her hands in the air, saying, "Suzerainty, remember suzerainty." Dr. Platt's classes were never boring. So what is suzerainty treaty theology? Well, basically, it takes the whole of the Hebrew Scriptures and places them into the context of how the world worked at that time. You see, in the ancient biblical times, it was common for an emperor to rule over many kingdoms. There would be one emperor, and all these other kingdoms were under the rule of the emperor. And to keep order within the empire, the emperor, which is also known as a suzerain, accomplished this by requiring two things of the kings under his rule. First, the kingdoms had to be loyal to the emperor. They would swear an oath, pay taxes, and defend the empire when called upon. That makes sense. And the second rule required peace between the kings and between the kingdoms. One king could not declare war on another kingdom, or he would face the wrath of the whole empire. And it was Dr. Platt's assertion that the Hebrew Scriptures were written in this same way. They were written in the form of a suzerainty treaty between God and humanity. And it goes something like this. God is represented by the emperor, and humanity is in the role of the kings. And as such, God requires our loyalty and for us to live peacefully with one another. Or to put it more biblically, the covenant requires us to love God, loyalty, and to love our neighbor, living peacefully. And she would argue that is why Jesus, when asked what's the greatest commandments of all, he said, love the Lord your God with all of your strength, with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your being, and love your neighbor as yourself. So according to this theology, the foundation of covenant then is articulated in the New Testament through the Great Commandment. But as interesting as all this is, what does suzerainty treaty theology have to do with Abram and his story? Well, the treaty we see between the emperor and the king says you have to swear loyalty. It says if you swear loyalty and if you keep the peace, then you will be rewarded. Hold in the back of your mind here that this covenant is conditional, right? It's the condition on it. If you swear loyalty, if you're peaceful, then you will be rewarded. God's covenant with Abram says, in essence, if you leave your homeland, if you're loyal to God, Abram, if you promote harmony amongst the hundreds of family and servants that are going to go with you, then you will be rewarded by becoming a great nation. Oh, and by the way, we're going to change your name to Abraham, and you'll be known as the father of all nations. So there's that. But remember, as I said earlier, God's covenant with humanity has changed over the course of time. It's matured. And in the new covenant, as shared with us by the prophet Jeremiah, we see a link or a bridge between God's covenant with Abraham, one that was external and, as I said, conditional, with you must leave your home and hearth to be rewarded, and the new covenant, one that's now internal and unconditional, as we experience in Jesus. The time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people. It won't be like the covenant I made with their ancestors. They messed that one up. No, the new covenant that I will make with the people is this. I will put my instructions within them and engrave them. What a wonderful word. Engrave them upon their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Fascinating. Our covenant with God, according to Jeremiah, is no longer dependent upon our actions. In other words, we don't do anything to earn God's blessing. Instead, and this is important, I'd jump up on a table right now if I could. This is important. We do something good because it's within us. We know we're no longer loyal to God or propagate peace among humanity because of an outside commandment to earn favor with God. Instead, God's covenant is engraved on our hearts. God's instructions are no longer just written down externally, but within our very being. And it's from this engraving that we're driven to be in right relationship with our fellow human beings and with the natural world. And my friends, it's through right relationship that we can truly see the covenant as something real, something tangible. When we live into right relationship, the covenant becomes alive in the world around us. And we see this living covenant alive in all kinds of places and in all kinds of people, don't we? Every day. The living covenant is among us in this place today and beyond the walls of this place, out there in the community. And our calling, my friends, our calling is to live into our covenant with God and humanity. But how do we do that? How do we live into this covenant? Well, I'm going to take you back to Hebrew theology again. So in the Hebrew tradition, remembering is very important. You probably know that. But to remember in the Hebrew tradition is to actually embody the story. When you remember someone's story, you embody their story. And when we embody a story, we intuitively live in such a way that brings that story to life, that bears witness to their story. Now, as people of faith, we embody God's story. That's how we live into the covenant. And it's this embodiment that leads us to bear witness to the stories of those who are struggling, to those who are hurting, to those who are on the margins of society. That's finally the very essence of covenant, that we attempt to live into right relationship with one another, with nature, and with God by embodying one another's stories, by embodying the story of evolution in the natural world. And we live into the covenant, my friends, by embodying God's story. God's eternal, ever-developing, ever-expanding story of loyalty and grace, and of living peacefully with all of our neighbors. May it become so for you and for me.